My name is Hope Goshinsky, and thank you for joining me today for this presentation. This is a product of my final course and final semester in Valdosta State University's Master Program in Library and Information Science. Today we will be covering trauma-informed care models and what strategies small or smaller public libraries can introduce to their staff to incorporate the model into their practice, even if they have small budgets or limited resources in their locality. First, before discussing strategies, I would like to review what trauma-informed care is. Trauma is no longer a concept of interest only to health and behavioral health professionals. It is a reality to people from all walks of life. Many organizations, including libraries, are beginning to recognize that when we interact with someone, we are also interacting with the entirety of that person's well-being and their history, including any past trauma. Most everyone has trauma in some form, and it influences how we engage with the world. A core principle of trauma-informed care is moving away from the traditional view of what is wrong with you when working with a person towards a story-based approach of what happened to you, to be more mindful and aware of how we engage with someone. This perspective is open-ended, more empathetic, and allows for more profound interactions. From here, a person or an organization can apply the 5 main principles of trauma-informed care. In the United States, trauma-informed care has existed in some form since the 1960s with the return of Vietnam War veterans, and has only increased since then. Since the 2000s, the approach has grown with the help of SAM-HSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. SAM-HSA established the 5 main principles of trauma-informed care: safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. The first principle, safety, means that throughout the organization, staff and all people served feel both physically and psychologically safe. Next, choice. For choice, patrons are supported in shared decision-making, are given choices whenever possible, and are incorporated into any goals an organization sets that involves the patrons. With collaboration, SAM-HSA places importance on partnering with relevant organizations and leveling of power differences between all levels of staff and with patrons. Collaboration results in inclusion, and an inclusive, level approach allows for everyone to be involved with trauma-informed care. Trustworthiness means operations and decisions are conducted with transparency, with the goal of building and maintaining trust with everyone involved, meaning all levels of staff and all types of patrons. And finally, empowerment. Empowerment means that everyone assumes the belief that people are resilient, capable of healing, and that trauma can create power imbalances. The empowerment principle encourages self-advocacy, shared decision-making, and goal setting so that the organization does not hold an unfair balance of power. With a better understanding of what trauma-informed care is, now we turn to why trauma-informed care is necessary, specifically in the field of public libraries. First and foremost, public library services are becoming more broad and fluid. Public libraries are beginning to operate as community centers, often as complex and dynamic as the patrons they serve. Changing library services, especially in the face of recent crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic, have resulted in an increased need to train library workers in modern skills that reflect public libraries' shifting nature. In particular, there are long-standing systemic gaps in connecting community members with resources related to mental health, housing, food insecurity, substance abuse, domestic violence, and other life experiences. Public libraries have the opportunity and perhaps the responsibility to fulfill this gap, but they must do so in a way that best serves users. Trauma-informed care is an empathetic and proven model that seeks to prevent re-traumatization. Additionally, needs assessments show that many public library workers already have a desire for more knowledge and training about how to better care for underserved patrons. Despite this need, some public libraries have been reluctant to implement a trauma-informed approach across their organization. Let's move on and discuss some of the hurdles they perceive. A new and emerging trend, especially in urban public libraries, is hiring a social worker as part of library staff, either part-time, full-time, or on a visiting basis. Social workers placed within a public library are meant to assist patrons experiencing complex life issues and connect them with essential services that may be beyond the expertise of typical library staff. This is becoming a more common tool employed by public libraries implementing trauma-informed care, as social workers are typically trained within the model, and it also embodies the collaborative principle advocated by SAM-HSA. Some libraries see this as the only solution to incorporate trauma-informed care. However, not all libraries have the funding to hire a separate social worker or other staff members dedicated to trauma-informed care and services. Libraries may also face staff shortages, liability issues, or municipal restrictions within their locale. Similarly, public libraries in general may be wary of becoming trauma-informed and expanding the level of care and services to their patrons. It creates more of an opportunity for what is or is not considered a library service to be blurred. With new roles comes responsibility as well as liability, and some public libraries worry about staff capabilities and boundaries when it comes to trauma-informed care. On the other side, staff may be reluctant to embrace their expanding work roles. Trauma-informed care may be intimidating, as it challenges one's perspectives, requires open-mindedness, and may involve more front-facing support with patrons experiencing trauma. This is all in addition to the standard barriers that small and rural public libraries face when implementing new services, such as budget restrictions, the limitations of their locale, and administrative reluctance to change. Thankfully, regardless of where a library stands, there are multiple start points, so to speak, so that trauma-informed care can gradually be incorporated into a public library's practice, regardless of their location or resources. Before any library should decide what kind of care work and training their staff should engage in, they must first know what their users need, where their staff feel there are competency gaps, and what services can or should be provided. A great starting point would be to distribute an anonymous survey in multiple formats to both patrons and staff to gather quantitative and qualitative data. This survey will gather perceptions of patrons' needs and the library's responsibility to meet those needs. Initial assessment should start with broad measures. When designing surveys, survey makers and admin staff should reflect on the main principles of trauma-informed care. How can you ensure those survey respondents feel safe in supplying answers? Who can you collaborate with to ensure everyone feels they contributed in creating a well-rounded survey? And how will the library be transparent throughout the survey process? Once the survey is conducted and results analyzed, the library can better define the needs of patrons and staff, plan desired programming and training, and begin tracing impact after they incorporate new services and trauma-informed care. The survey will also lay the groundwork for what trauma-informed training is feasible for their organization specifically. When beginning to learn and implement trauma-informed care, many public libraries may first find turning to their community partners as an excellent starting point. Community organizations and partners may already possess knowledge and experience working with local populations experiencing trauma and can advise the library what trauma-informed care looks like within their specific community and how library services can adapt. Community organizations to reach out to may include local crisis lines for abuse and domestic violence, emergency shelter organizations, food pantries and food assistance programs, mental health advocacy and support groups, senior services, disaster support groups, homelessness assistance programs, disability services, legal aid, immigration services, and LGBTQ groups, among many others. Many public libraries quickly find that their communities hold a wealth of resources and organizations already engaged in trauma-informed care. For small or rural public libraries that cannot afford to hire their own dedicated trauma-informed staff, their community can serve as an introduction to learning and implementing trauma-informed care through workshops, partnerships, and potentially collaborating with interns. For workshops, public libraries can seek out educators and leaders from local organizations. These leaders can inform public library staff of all levels, not just front-facing staff, of their organization's best practices when working with disadvantaged or distressed populations. Workshops also open the opportunity for collaboration and strategic partnerships. The organizations public libraries reach out to as trauma-informed models may equally wish to learn how the public library is serving the public and how the two organizations can combine forces so users' needs are met more efficiently. In doing so, a library can extend their reach. When beginning partnerships, public libraries should think of specific, existing communities within the populations they serve. Which populations or groups would benefit by being connected to a community partner? What kind of programming or partnerships could be built from awareness of this need? Finally, internships. Interns are likely to come from the same community organizations discussed earlier, or, alternatively, local social work graduate programs. As seen in Kansas City public libraries, past internship and public library collaborations that focused on trauma-informed care have resulted in interns training staff on how traumatic life events can result in homelessness, mental health issues, and other complex life experiences. Additionally, trained interns can share important insights and solutions regarding the secondary trauma public librarians experience working with high-need patrons. However, not all communities are the same. There may be areas, especially rural or impoverished areas, where community resources are lacking and collaborations are difficult or impossible. Regardless, public libraries can still turn towards independent measures to learn, practice, and apply trauma-informed care. In light of COVID-19, virtual training has become a staple for many professionals seeking to become acquainted with trauma-informed care, and public libraries are no exception. There are plenty of resources available for free or for a modest fee. All resources mentioned are included at the end of the webinar. Even if a library cannot work with local organizations in person, you may also find community organizations have already produced educational material for their own staff and may be willing to share it with you. Finally, if all of the above are not possible due to time or budget constraints, a library can always work to expand its professional collection and encourage staff to pursue their own trauma-informed care-themed continuing education and share their findings with others. This is a more independent yet collaborative approach that encourages staff to embrace the trauma-informed model based on their own interest and in their own time. But any progress is progress. Plenty of resources exist within professional and academic databases related to trauma-informed care. For example, even within the last couple of years, Rebecca Tolley has published an excellent resource specifically for libraries through ALA titled A Trauma-Informed Approach to Library Services. And peer learning encourages appreciating all opportunities to learn and withholding judgment of other peers' perspectives of trauma. Regardless of what avenue a public library determines is the best fit for them, there are broad best practices. Best practices will make the transition to teaching and implementing trauma-informed care a more efficient transition, as well as long-lasting. First, it is important to model trauma-informed care from the top down. Trauma-informed care is not solely for front-facing staff and should not be limited to front-facing staff. It should be practiced and exemplified by all departments, especially administrative and executive staff. Library policymakers decide who the library serves and how they are served, which really dictates how well a public library exemplifies trauma-informed care. Whether it is a director at a library with one full-time staff member or a rural library system with small satellite branches, everyone needs to be on the same page for modeling trauma-informed care. Additionally, especially in the beginning, library workers newly embracing trauma-informed care should focus on weaving the model throughout one's work, rather than focusing on individual problems that need a trauma-informed approach. Baby steps. Trauma-informed care is a mindset rather than a band-aid to apply to specific patron experiences. Finally, transparency is key, especially among staff. As one of the main principles of trauma-informed care, staff need to understand exactly why, when, and how the model is being applied. And if mistakes are made, what corrective actions are being taken so that staff and patrons feel safe, empowered, and part of the decision process in the future. After all is said and done, having learned about trauma, trauma-informed care, and the strategies applicable to libraries of any size or budget, what can we look forward to on the other side? What can we start to see as benefits of trauma-informed care? Besides patron benefits, such as increased engagement, improved feelings of safety, more opportunities for choice and empowerment, higher quality service, and less likelihood of re-traumatization, there are positive results and outcomes for public libraries as well. For example, many public libraries see improved staff performance and confidence. This occurs as staff develop boundary management, learn self-care and resilience strategies, and begin to acknowledge their own trauma, especially the trauma they assume by potentially working in high-stress environments with the public. Public libraries also see a growth in stronger community relations, both between users and community organizations, and between libraries and said organizations. This is a product of the encouraged collaborative nature outlined by the trauma-informed care model. And finally, public libraries can showcase a more profound fulfillment of their mission. As libraries begin to modify their missions and vision to best reflect who they are as adaptive centers of their communities, embracing trauma-informed care reflects how they seek to serve all the patrons that interact with their library. For those wishing to continue their trauma-informed journey, there are several online resources to refer to, as discussed earlier with virtual training. For example, National Healthcare for the Homeless Council offers a free-to-access webinar series that covers the complexity of trauma, the trauma-informed care paradigm, and approaches to care for the public. The SAM-HSA also offers continuing education resources for those interested in trauma. While not all resources focus specifically on trauma-informed care, their training resources reflect the trauma-informed care model and are invaluable for anyone who interacts with people coping with trauma as part of their work. While specifically related to children, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network also offers a major collection of accessible webinars, online courses, and other curriculum formats related to trauma-informed care with children and how trauma intersects with childhood. This resource would especially be vital for children and teen librarians or those working in youth services. A subscription service that is worthwhile to consider is Ryan Dowd's Librarian's Guide to Homelessness and his monthly webinars. While trauma-informed care is not covered specifically, Ryan focuses on empathy, de-escalation, and preventing re-traumatization with patrons. The majority of his guides would embody the 5 main principles of trauma-informed care. As a reminder, this webinar is not meant to be a substitute for learning from those professionally trained in trauma-informed practices, but rather as a guide to the importance of trauma-informed care and where to access local and online guidance to better apply trauma-informed care at one's library. Additionally, whenever possible, the library should not serve as a substitute for professional community services, but instead as a bridge. I wish you all the best of luck if you are just starting the journey to become engaged in trauma-informed care. For those already passionate about the topic, I thank you. I appreciate you listening to this webinar.